Thank you very much, Maria Agnes, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, the main objective of my presentation this afternoon would be to provide you with some background information and also some key elements for better understand the suspected reactions and how they are reported to the EudraVigilance database. I will show you also the type of data that you can retrieve from the ADR reports website. And within this presentation, I will try also to clarify some of the most common misunderstandings that we have seen in the publications, also in the social media, since the first approval of the vaccines against the COVID-19 infection. So this is the outline of my presentation. I will explain first what is EudraVigilance, what is a suspected ADR, and the principles for the reported ADRs, what is the EudraVigilance access policy, which is an important document for us, and then I will move to the ADR reports website, and I'll show you how we should understand and interpret the data from the website, and then some take-home or take-away messages. So EudraVigilance is the system for collecting, managing, and analyzing suspected adverse reactions to medicines authorized in the European Economic Area. The European Medicines Agency, the EMA, operates the system, which actually became operational in December 21 on behalf of the European Union Medicines Regulatory Network. What I would like to highlight here is that the submission of cases to EudraVigilance is established and mandated first by the pharmacovigilance legislation, by the European pharmacovigilance legislation, but it is also implemented through different ISO standards, so international standards and international agreements, especially those driven by the ICH, the International Conference on Harmonization. And that means that many regulators all over the world follow the same standards, so they have the same practices. And that also means that the collection of the data in EudraVigilance is under a very well-controlled environment. So all the business rules, all the type of data, all the format of the data we collect electronically, it is well controlled by the standards and the agreements. I'm going to show you here what is the reporting flow in order to better understand how we get the cases, the side effect cases in EudraVigilance. I will make the examples with the vaccines because I understand this is the main topic of interest at the moment, but everything can be applied to any medicinal product authorized in the Union. So let's imagine that after vaccination, a patient experienced some suspected adverse drug reactions, and then the patient can report those reactions to the national competent authority in the member state where the reaction occurred, or the patient can decide to submit directly those reports to the marketing authorization holder of the vaccine. So in this case, the pharmaceutical industry. But another scenario could be that the patient decides to talk to their healthcare professional about the suspected side effects, and then the healthcare professional may send the report to the national competent authority in the member state or to the marketing authorization holder of the vaccine. And then whoever gets the reports, either the NCAs, the national competent authorities, or the pharmaceutical industry, would submit those cases to the EudraVigilance database. And this is how we get in EudraVigilance the patient reports and the healthcare professional reports. So the first part of the reporting is a voluntary phase. So patients and healthcare professionals are, of course, encouraged to report suspected side effects, but it is not a legal obligation, let's say, and this is how we call the initial reporters in kind of spontaneous reporting terms. The second phase would be for the marketing authorization holders or for the national competent authorities, and these are the senders of the cases. And this is a mandatory phase because the European legislation mandates the national competent authorities or the marketing authorization holders to submit those cases to EudraVigilance when they become aware of the cases. So in EudraVigilance, we are secondary receivers of the data. So healthcare professionals and patients cannot submit the cases directly to EudraVigilance. They need to do it through the national competent authorities or through the marketing authorization holders. What is a suspected ADR and what are some of the key principles for the spontaneous reporting systems? So an adverse reaction is a response to a medicinal product which is harmful and unintended. Suspected ADRs of suspected side effects are medical events that have been observed after the administration of a medicinal product or after the administration of the vaccine, but which are not necessarily related or caused by it. A suspected ADR, therefore, is not the same as an identified risk. And something we need to keep in mind is that EudraVigilance is a database for suspected ADRs, suspected adverse drug reactions. It's not a database for suspected or identified risks. The fact that someone reports a suspected ADR doesn't mean that the reaction was caused by the vaccine or by the medicine. It could be a health issue that may have happened anyway, for example, because of an unrelated condition or because of another medication. And the same principle applies to fatalities. If someone died after the vaccination, doesn't mean that the death was caused by the vaccine. So these are key principles that we need to keep in mind all the time when we are looking at the data from the ADR reports website. One case or one report of suspected side effects generally refers to one patient. Okay, there could be different cases submitted for the same patient in case the same patient experienced different reactions at different points in times with different medication. But just to keep it simple for this presentation, let's consider that one case generally refers to one patient. But that patient after the vaccination may have experienced more than one suspected adverse drug reaction. Everything would be included in one report, but one individual case can contain more than one suspected reaction. And in the example you have a female patient that received Comirnaty and experienced feeling unwell, pneumonia, atrial fibrillation, and I need to put my glasses, and arrhythmia. Okay, so the number of cases is never the same as the number of reactions, and this has created a lot of confusion in some of the publications that we have seen. We also need to understand that EudraVigilance is a very live database. Only in 2021, we experienced 3.5 million reports that were processed in the database, and that average means that the database experienced 10,000 daily transactions. So as we speak, we are receiving suspected ADR reports. One ADR report is formed by the initial case, but then we may have also follow-up information because the patient or the healthcare professional may have more information about the reaction following visits with the specialist or the healthcare professional, and they would send this information as a follow-up information. So we have the initial case, but also the national competent authorities or the marketing authorization holders would send us follow-up cases. In the ADR website and in EudraVigilance, you will only see the most updated version of the case. So you only see the case once, and that would be with the latest version of the case. We can have also duplicates in the database, because let's imagine that the patient decides to send the case to the marketing authorization holder directly, but also the patient talks to the healthcare professional, and the healthcare professional in parallel decides to send the case to the national competent authorities. In that case, we will have the same case twice into the EudraVigilance database, and we have an electronic algorithm to identify those duplicates, and when the system identifies the duplicates, we merge the duplicates in one single case, something that we call a master case, and then that case is resubmitted to EudraVigilance again. And we may also have nullification of cases, and the nullification of cases is when the case was initially submitted by error, and then the healthcare professional realized the adverse reaction didn't happen or something like this, and then that case would be nullified. Here in the screenshot, you have a picture of a line listing of the ADR website, and there we provide an identification number, is the EU local number. This EU local number belongs to the transaction of the case case, so to the single transaction. And that means that this number is going to change from the initial case to the follow-up cases, and this allows us to track all the different transactions in the database. And equally, when we have duplicates and we merge it into a master case, the master case is going to be allocated with an EU local number. So for the same case, the EU local number can change within the time. And this explains why some people were looking for the same case and they couldn't find it. But that doesn't mean that the cases disappear from the database, and we have seen some confusion about it in some publications. The cases do not disappear from the database unless there was a justified nullification of the case, but the cases are there, simply they are under a different EU local number. Why do we have cases outside the European Economic Area? And this is also a common question. So according to the EU legislation, the marketing authorization holders have the obligation to submit all the serious cases of suspected ADRs from all over the world to EudraVigilance. And this is obviously for the products that are authorized in Europe, but also authorized somewhere else. So the COVID-19 vaccines are authorized in the European Economic Area, but are also authorized in many countries all over the world. So having those serious cases from all over the world will help us to get more data quickly, and that will enhance the signal detection activities. It is therefore mandated in the legislation that we should have those cases, and this is the reason why we have cases from all over the world. And in the geographic distribution of the ADR website, you can see the number of cases that are coming from the non-European Economic Area jurisdictions. So what is the EudraVigilance access policy? This is an important document for us, and the document is published on the ADR website. And we need to understand that the data in EudraVigilance contains patient details and patients identifiers. And this data is needed for safety assessment. It's definitely needed for us to identify duplicates, but it is easy, I think, to understand that the data is very sensitive from the data protection perspective. So not all of the data that we have in EudraVigilance can be published. And this is in order to protect the identification of the individuals and protect the re-identification of patients. And therefore, the EudraVigilance access policy determines for us the data to be made available to the different stakeholders. We have different stakeholders group, and you have them there in the right-hand side of the slide. The stakeholders group 1 are the EMA, the NCAs, and the European Commission. Then we have the public and the healthcare professionals, the marketing authorization holders, research academia and research institutions, the WHO, and other medicines regulators. So the access policy considers the needs of the different stakeholders. For instance, marketing authorization holders, according to the legislation, they have the legal obligation to monitor EudraVigilance, and therefore they require to have a specific access. And then depending on that, and also applying data protection, we provide the data through different levels of access. So the access policy is in line totally with the EU data protection legislation. And we also need to understand that we publish a lot of information about all the medicines authorized in the ADR website, authorized in Europe, and we provide this data through the ADR website. So the measures that taken in the access policy are applied for all the medicinal products approved in the European Economic Area. So if we have understood this, now we are ready to understand that the ADR reports website makes the data available according to level 1 access for stakeholders group 2, who are the healthcare professionals and the general public. So all of those cases that we have collected from the patients and from the healthcare professionals will be available through the ADR website. And by now, I guess you all perfectly know how to get to the page where the COVID-19 vaccines are displayed, so I'm not going to explain that. But before we go and search into any of the reports, it is important to see that there is a lot of background information, how to understand the data, how to understand the reports, and also the messages in the disclaimer that you should acknowledge before you go into a report. And this background information is very important to consider the whole context and to understand the data that we can see in a report. And we understand there is a lot of information there, but as I said, this is a complex process, and sometimes it's important to go into the details in order to provide the right messages to the citizens. We try to streamline a little bit all of this information, and we created the COVID-19 important messages, and there are some specific bullet points that would be key elements to understand before reading the data for the COVID-19 vaccines. And we have also a user manual of the ADR website that is also, of course, published, and this is a step-by-step guideline that you can follow and navigate through the website. So the first part of the ADR website would be aggregated data, and by aggregated data I mean the number of cases. And then we're going to have the number of cases stratified by many different parameters. It would be very boring for me to go in this presentation through all the tabs, but I will highlight the key ones. First, as I said, EudraVigilance is a very live database, and we are constantly receiving cases. The data on the ADR website is updated every Monday with the data up to the previous Saturday. So you will have there the data log point for the data you are reading. And in this first page, we have the total number of spontaneous cases. And remember this page because this would be the place where you can get accurately the total number of cases. And apart from the total number of cases, then you have the cases stratified by patient age, also by the geographic distribution, and also by age. And if you scroll down, you will have also how many cases from healthcare professionals and how many cases from patients. Then we have, as I said, a different number of tabs where the information is stratified in many different ways. We can see the number of individual cases received over time, the number of individual cases by the different reactions groups, the cases for a selected reaction group, and then stratified by different parameters, for instance, age, gender, seriousness, reporters group, geographic origin, and the reaction outcome. But we can also look at the number of cases for a specific and selected reaction. So I'll show you now how drilling down to the reactions. As I mentioned before, one of the international agreements implemented in EudraVigilance is the use of MEDRA, and MEDRA is the Medical Dictionary for Regulatory Activities, and this is the dictionary we use to code the reaction. And the electronic coding is necessary in order to be able to retrieve the data in a standard and in a comprehensive way. So when we are looking for a specific reaction, we need to figure out first in which reaction group the specific reaction is included. And I think we will understand this better with some examples. For example, the reaction thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome is included in the blood and lymphatic system disorders. Myocarditis belongs to the cardiac disorders. Blindness would be included in the eye disorders. Cerebral thrombosis would be in the nervous system disorders. Abortion spontaneous would be included in the pregnancy, puerperion, and perinatal conditions. And venous thrombosis would be included in the vascular disorders. Some of them are more intuitive than others, and we acknowledge that in general the people don't speak in MEDRA terms, but this is something very difficult for us to streamline because the data needs to be electronically coded, as I mentioned, otherwise there's no way for us to retrieve the data properly. I'll show you here some examples. For instance, if we want to see the number of cases for myocarditis or pericarditis with Comirnaty, the Pfizer vaccine, then in the tab number of reports for a specific reaction, then we should go first to the cardiac reaction group, and then once we click on the cardiac reaction group, the system is going to provide me the different reactions with cases included in that reaction group. So clicking in the myocarditis, you need to click in the reaction itself. You will find the number of cases stratified by age and also by outcome of the reaction. Okay, and if we want to look at pericarditis in alphabetical order, we can see the pericarditis. Remember, you can only select one reaction each time. So another example for if we want to see the cases for cerebral thrombosis with Vaxzevria, the AstraZeneca vaccine, then we need to select the reaction group first, and that reaction is the nervous system. And then in alphabetical order, we will see the cerebral thrombosis, and there we can see the number of cases for cerebral thrombosis. You can click in the bars, and we can also move the view to a chart if you find better to see the cases in a chart. So as I mentioned before, there is a difference between the number of cases and the number of reactions. And as the cases can contain more than one reaction, and different reactions belong to different reaction groups, the sum of the number of cases per reaction group is never the same as the total number of cases, and we have seen a lot of misunderstanding about this because they were overcounting the cases in some of the media and some of the publications we have seen. For example, a patient that experienced bradycardia, myocardial infarction, and pneumonia, this is one case, is one patient. So the same case contained 3 suspected reactions, but is counted in the cardiac anti-infection reactions group because bradycardia and myocardial infarction, they both belong to the cardiac system organ class of the reaction group, and the pneumonia belongs to the infections reaction group. So it's one case with 3 reactions, but it's counted in 2 different reactions groups. So if we add the number in the website from the different reaction groups, we never get the total number of cases. To get the total number of cases, we need to go to the first page. Regarding fatalities, the ADR website doesn't provide the total number of cases with fatal outcome that we have received per vaccine, but instead provides the number of cases with more context. So the number of cases with fatal outcome with more context, because we can see the number of cases for a specific reaction group, but also we can see the number of cases for a specific reaction that were reported to be fatal. So in the left-hand side, in the first screenshot, you have the total number of cases in the cardiac reaction group where the outcome was reported to be fatal. And this is just in general for the whole cardiac system organ class or reaction group. But then I can drill down into the different reactions, and if I click in one of the reactions, atrial fibrillation in the example on the right, then you have 14 cases that were reported with outcome as fatal. And this is one of the ways to look at the fatalities in the ADR reports website. Now I move to the second part, and we have seen up until now the cases in an aggregated way, so number of cases, but the ADR website also provides us the possibility to see the details of the individual cases, and for that I need to go to the line listing report, and the line listing report will offer me different ways to filter the data. It's better to filter the data because with the amount of cases we have now for the COVID-19 vaccines, these line listings are very, very big. So you can select their seriousness criteria if you want to see serious or non-serious cases, whether you want to see cases from the EEA or non-EEA, so the geographic distribution and also the sex. So the patient age, I can look for a reaction group as well and for a specific reaction, and cerebral thrombosis is the example I selected there. You need to click run the line listing, and then you will get a tabular format of the specific cases. So you will see one line is one case with all the information that we can provide you for the specific cases according to the level of access that has been established in the EudraVigilance access policy. At the end of the line list, on the right-hand side, you have a hyperlink to the ICSR forms. ICSR are individual case safety report, and these ICSR forms are a more readable format of the information provided for each case, so they are nicer to read, I think, for the people. So in order to avoid misunderstandings, the EMA publishes in the monthly safety updates the number of cases in the EEA reported with fatal outcome. And this is because we have seen, as I mentioned before, different misunderstandings when counting the cases, especially adding the cases for the different reactions groups, coming with numbers that had nothing to do with them, with the reality. So we publish there in the monthly safety updates the numbers up to a certain point in time that would be referred to in the publications, and you can see there the figures that represent the total number of individual cases reported spontaneously in the European Economic Area for which a reaction was reported to have a fatal outcome. So, and I'll take now through the different messages for to wrap up my presentation. So EudraVigilance is a very live database. We are constantly receiving cases, and EudraVigilance is kind of a very well-controlled environment, mandated not only by the legislation, but also by many different international agreements. The information contained in the EudraVigilance database relates to reported suspected adverse drug reactions, not confirmed risk. So we need to always go back to what is the purpose of monitoring spontaneous ADRs and what is the purpose of these pharmacovigilance databases or spontaneous reporting systems, and is to identify unusual patterns or trends, so to identify new risks that were unknown at the time of the authorization. The database, therefore, doesn't contain the total number of fatalities, and this is the ADR website. It doesn't contain the total number of fatalities. The fatalities are included, but in the right context through the different reaction groups and reactions. So if we understand that EudraVigilance is not a database for identifying risk, to better understand the safety profile of a medicinal product, or the publications such as the product information, the assessment reports, and the safety assessments updates that are available would be maybe a better place to check together the safety profile of the medicinal product. And I think with this, I finish my presentation. So I thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was clear and helpful for you to help us conveying the right messages to the people. Thank you very much.